Welcome to another edition of In the Loop. I'm your host, Iris Argueta. Our special guest today is the new Montgomery County Council President, Nancy Navarro. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Edie.
Well, you completed your first full term on the council. And how do you feel about being the first Latina in the Washington region to hold this office?
Well, of course, it is an extraordinary privilege and an honor to have the distinction of being the first. It's always a bit surprising, but also I think in many ways it marks the opening, of course, of many years to come. I know that there are a lot of young women, young Latino women who aspire to leadership positions and political positions, etc. And being the first just means that you open that path, and I look forward to supporting many others that may want to come right behind me.
Our nomination of our county council new president, Nancy Navarro.
It's amazing to be able to represent, all the residents of District 4, but particularly being the first Latina. I think it marks a historic moment for this community.
Well, I guess some people must be wondering about your past. I thought it might be good for the viewers to learn a little bit about your background. I know that some of us know that you went to the University of Missouri, to the Midwest, but how did you get to the Midwest and how did you get to Maryland?
Well, I'm originally from Venezuela. My father, when I was 10 years old, came to the University of Missouri-Rolla to study petroleum engineering. And Venezuela being an oil producer, it was a time when they were really going through a lot of need for people to have expertise in that area. And I was 10 years old, I learned English. It took me about 6 months to learn English. It was just very quick because, as a child, it's so easy. And then the whole family relocated. We lived there for 2 years. Went back to Venezuela and then came back to the University of Missouri in Columbia to study. And we had some friends there, et cetera, and so my family felt comfortable sending me there. I was 17 years old. And I went to school there, I graduated, I had an opportunity to get some work experience, and then when it was time to go back to Venezuela, I came to the DC region because I had many friends who were here working. And long story short, met my husband, we settled in Montgomery County, right here in Rockville was our first apartment, and now it's 23 years later, we've been here, we've raised our children here. They have attended Montgomery County Public Schools, and it's been a real honor to now be able to serve in the public arena.
Absolutely, but you also have experience as being the president of the Board of Education of the county. Now, how would you say that experience will be instrumental for your new role as president?
It took me literally 5 minutes when I was able to get the gavel here at the county council for it to all come back. I think those 2 years, and they were consecutive years when I was president of the Board of Education, really trained me for this particular position. Obviously, the council has a much broader portfolio, and so there are going to be many things that we're going to have to shepherd through this year, but I take my position seriously. To be president means that you are here to shepherd the body through the work that needs to be accomplished. It's not about me personally as a council member and my agenda, it's about the body and it's about the institution, and so I really do look forward to this year, and the good news is that, this is an amazing group of people. My colleagues are just extraordinary people who are very dedicated to serving the residents of Montgomery County. So I'm looking forward to this.
Well, terrific. But, I think that there must be something that perhaps that comes to mind after being on the council for 3 years. What has surprised you perhaps the most about having the office that you didn't know before you actually took office on the council?
I would say it's probably the complexity and the diversity of issues, because you are literally, 1 minute you may be talking about a land use issue, and the next minute you may be talking about, the bamboo that is growing wild in a constituent's home. The next minute you may be talking about trash pickup, and the next minute you're talking about education policy. And so you really do have to be a generalist. I think that is the one thing I've learned most. Obviously, we all have our areas that we like to go deeper and be kind of in the weeds. But given the fact that this is such an extraordinary job in terms of the diversity of topics, I think being a generalist is important. And just, you're on 24/7. I think that's the other issue with the advent of the internet, and we're all plugged with our iPhones and iPads, et cetera. You literally are on all the time. I think in the past, people used snail mail. So perhaps if a council member received a letter, it would take, 2 weeks to respond. Perhaps right now the expectation is that if I sent you an email, I need the response immediately.
Snap.
So things have changed quite a bit, and I think that we're still trying to transition and keep up with this 21st century expectation of what communication should look like. So those have been sort of some of the, I think, surprises for me. But I have a great team in my office, great staff, and we've been able to ride the wave, I think, quite successfully.
Well, there are a lot of challenges that are coming up. The first 2 years of being here on the council came during the time when we had the economic downturn that impacted the county and the region. And now, how has this changed some of the goals that you wanted to accomplish? And when you first ran for office, I would imagine.
Yes, I think that everybody was taken by surprise in terms of how deep this recession truly has been. And so for me, obviously, when I came in, I had some definite goals in mind, especially for the area that I represent. Obviously, the biggest question that most residents always ask me is, how come we don't have the type of amenities and the types of job centers, et cetera, in this part of the county? And so for me, that was always something that propelled me to want to take this position. Also, the issues of equity that, cut across not just education, but access to housing and access to healthcare and all those things. And this economic recession meant that we had to consolidate or cut a lot of services. And now that we're beginning to sort of crawl out of it, obviously we're never going to get back to those days where, resources were so ample that people could just propose new programs and expansions left and right. Now it's all about strategic investment and strategic thinking around how do we utilize the resources that we have, retool them, and so we can get the best outcomes, and because the county has gone through an extraordinary transformation in the last, I would say 30 years, not just in terms of ethnic diversity, but also socioeconomic, also the, I think, emergence of certain urban centers, et cetera. We cannot continue to provide services the same way we have in the past. So in a strange way, I think this recession has forced everybody to pause and take note and maybe reevaluate and redesign the way that we deliver services, the way that we adopt certain policies, or the way that we put forth our strategic thinking to get the best possible outcome from the county. And that's been great because at the end of the day, we have a lot of dedicated people, very smart people. And I think if anything, we're going to come out of this much better and stronger.
So this is obviously something that you will take as you prepare for the budget this year, I would imagine. So what would you say are some of the top priorities in your agenda when it comes to that?
Well, this is going to be a budget that hopefully will not be as difficult as the past 3 budgets that we have had to deal with during this recession. It is definitely, I think, a time to pause and also make sure that we can compensate our employees, especially our government employees, give them some type of incentive. We were able to give them a bonus. I think the time has come to give them, some sort of a raise. That's going to be, I think, critical. At the same time, we have to make sure that we continue to take a look at those programs that support our children and our families. Very important to take a look at the education budget and make sure that it is there with enough resources to serve our children. I think that maintenance of effort level gives ample resources, and I do expect that we can meet maintenance of effort this year. I know that had been a problem in the past years, but I do expect that we're going to be able to do that, and that's important because that type of support is critical for our students. Public safety, it's always something that we have to be monitoring, and that we have to always make sure that we have ample resources there as well, because even though crime has gone down in the county, we have to be vigilant, and we know that we may have some spots where we have to always monitor. So these are some of the areas that we have to look at. But most importantly, our economic development agenda, I think it's what we need to also keep in mind and continue to work with our business community partners, both the ones that have the large companies and the small businesses, to ensure that we have this idea of investing in the economic infrastructure as well as the social infrastructure of the county. To me, that's the formula for taking this county forward.
Well, you've mentioned development, and one of the areas that I know will see a lot of change in the next 20 to 30 years is the area of Wheaton.
Yeah.
So where do we see the fine balance between the residents, the small businesses, and the developers that want change?
You know, Wheaton, I think it's going to emerge, and it's funny because I have had so many conversations with people from very different neighborhoods or different sectors who keep saying, you know, Wheaton is probably going to emerge as Montgomery County's finest Adams Morgan-like, right? Wheaton has an extraordinary personality, an amazing, I think, a mix of great cultures and great cuisine, and what we need is just to kind of take it all and then connect it. So, you know, pedestrian access is enhanced, so we have also people there during the day, that we have people there during the evening as well, that we have families coming over, and that it's a wonderful, you know, aesthetically pleasing, safe, beautiful place to be. And it is already, I think, all those things, but I think this revitalization effort is going to simply put the cherry on top, if you will, and make sure that if there are some spots that need to be enhanced, that they can. And it's historic. I mean, this is the first time that Wheaton has seen this infusion of resources. You know, we can't forget that the Library Community Center combination project is underway. It's going to get started very soon. We also made sure that Wheaton High School Edison, you know, was put back in the CIP. It's amazing all the things that are happening in Wheaton, and we're working very closely to make sure that all the residents are involved in the process, and that very soon I think everybody's going to be surprised. It will be the wow factor, I think, when everything is said and done.
Well, obviously the wow factor is for some of the members of our community. As we almost come to the end of this program, I want to mention that you are the only Latino member of the council, and you've been a strong voice for this community in making sure that they receive their fair share of services. And how is the county doing in this, and where do we need to improve on this?
I think the number one issue, the area where I want to focus the most and continue my focus, is in making sure that this is a community that keeps growing in numbers but doesn't seem to be informed. It doesn't seem to understand that it is really important to participate in the civic process. And so access, to me, that's really critical. And when we talk about, and sometimes people seem to get a little bit bothered, you know, that I tend to focus on this community. Number one, I do represent Wheaton, which has the largest share of the Latino community in the county, and because I am the only Latino council member, naturally people will come to me. But I think it's important that we ensure that the community is educated and understands the resources that are available, their responsibility to participate actively, especially that they need to be very, very engaged in their children's education. And so these are things that are very close to my heart in terms of my policy goals, and so we will continue to work on those efforts, and I think that we will all benefit in ensuring that all of our residents have a place at the table when it comes to participating in the civic process and in decision-making processes, because the worst thing that can happen is for somebody to have no idea that somehow, you know, a building all of a sudden goes up, or a major policy change has happened, and you just didn't know because you didn't even understand, or they say you don't know what you don't know. So that's part of my goal in terms of working with this community and many other, I think, communities that perhaps are not as active as they should be.
Well, we have many issues to discuss and so little time, but I hope you can return to our program.
Absolutely.
And because we can talk to you about many more issues that affect other districts.
Definitely.
So thank you again for joining us. And thank you for watching In the Loop. I'm your host, Iris Argueta.